we shall try to move a bit faster so that we do whatever we are supposed to do. This is a NIPN retreat. We are calling it a retreat. We are retreating here to do certain things, and we have very, very clear deliverables that we shall share with you at the right time that we need to get out of this process. Policy landscape within your sectors to see how nutrition information can be of help. But we also want to understand some issues related to the sector capacities with regard to nutrition information management and see how this project can work with you. So in the next couple of hours and the following day, we shall be engaged in that. So for the purpose of being here, we want to make sure that we work together, we review all that together and be able to generate that information that is going to set a foundation of how OPM and the project, the NIPN project, gets a proper way of working with you. So I don't want to say a lot. I do a lot of presentations in here, but I would like to take this opportunity to invite the OPM representative to come and give us opening remarks.
Good morning once again. Yes, we need to breathe life into this. Thank you, Patrick, for that opening phrase and those opening remarks. Coordination and implementation, strategic coordination and implementation at the Office of the Prime Minister. First and foremost, we all understand and appreciate the need for data in planning and implementation, right? Amen? Good. Yeah, so ideally, that is the key gap that the NIPN project came to fill, right? Yes. To the extent that initially we've been rolling nutrition projects and nutrition information activities, but the element of data has been resurfacing over and over again. Amen? So ideally, as Patrick has mentioned, we've come here to caucus and understand what are our strategic opportunities within our ministries. Yes? What are they? And we map them so that we understand them and ensure that the NIPN project can be able to support us to really fill up with these opportunities, right? Yes. Also the element of policies. Many of you are implementing various policies within your own jurisdictions. Agriculture there, health per se, trade in its own right. But then, how can we all interlink these policies to ensure that we drive nutrition as a whole government within the whole government approach, within that multi-sectoral element, yes? So ideally, those are the opportunities we need to build on. You may understand that we are developing the second nutrition action plan, and this has to be informed by data. We need real evidence to inform our decision making. And I'm happy to have members from the academia, Makerere, honestly. We need that support to guide us on how to utilize and translate this data into the policy frameworks that we need. Yeah? And then, ideally, I think this is also based on enabling us to build our capacity on how to domesticate and actually mainstream nutrition within our planning frameworks. I think the data and the discussions here will be helpful in enabling us to realize what are the needs, how can my sector support another sector, what are the data gaps that we need, ideally, within our own selves to generate nutrition strategies, nutrition activities, to improve our nutrition activities and our mandates in regard to taking forward nutrition elements at the country level. So broadly, those are the key issues that we are going to deliberate upon, and I'm very positive that we shall be able to attain them.
Now, do you have this paper, this folder? There is a lot of information inside this paper, and actually it's the overview I'm going to present what NIPN project is all about. So we have a highlight of the National Information Platforms for Nutrition NIPN project. And I would just run through very briefly, and I would also call upon our colleague who sits at UBOS also to give part of the overview from what NIPN that sits at the UBOS side, what they do. So we are going to have two overviews, one project, but two overviews, because he will bring in the element that is to do with the data side of the project. So NIPN, in full, it's the National Information Platforms for Nutrition. It's a government of Uganda project. It is implemented by Office of the Prime Minister and the Secretariat of Nutrition. It's being implemented in partnership with UBOS, and it's funded by the European Union. It started in 2018. It's supposed to be a 4-year project. And unfortunately, the actual time the work began was in 2019, March. So there was almost a year and some months that have been lost. And what we are trying to do in this project is to expedite, to move at a very fast speed to recover the lost time. How did the project come about? I think for those who are joining us for the first time, we need to know that in the country, Uganda, we've had a lot of researches, a lot of studies, a lot of assessments, a lot of evaluations, meaning that there is a lot of data out there on nutrition. But there was a challenge on how those researches are coordinated. There was a challenge of ownership of the data that is collected by the various actors or stakeholders on nutrition. There was also a challenge of not only ownership, but the quality of that data out there. What was the quality? No one knew. In other words, a lot of things were happening. So this project came in to ensure that all the data that is being collected out there is coordinated, is pulled into a central repository for ease of access and utilization by various actors on nutrition. So that is a very, very brief background to this project. And once that was realized by the Office of the Prime Minister and worked with the EU, this project was funded, and it's going to try and solve or work around those problems. What are the key objectives of this project? Maybe to mention that this project is also in 10 countries. It's not only in Uganda, it's also in other 10 countries. And the global objectives of this project relate to these three: to create capacity within national institutions, to operate and maintain a national information platform for food and nutrition programs, creating capacity within national institutions. Now, that means this is a capacity development project, and it's solely aimed at creating the capacity in national institutions, in the MDAs, ministry sectors and agencies, for them to have a functional information platform for nutrition. The second objective is about strengthening the capacity to track progress in meeting national objectives. Mr. Senkungu talked about the National Action Plan for Nutrition, Plan 2. It has objectives, it has intentions to be achieved. So this project aims at strengthening the capacity of all actors, all stakeholders on nutrition, to be able to track progress in meeting national objectives. The national objectives articulated in UNAP 2, but also articulated in the National Development Plan. We know National Development Plan 3 is being developed, so that we are able to prevent malnutrition in its all forms and monitor nutrition investments. In other words, we should be able to know where are we investing in terms of nutrition, why are we investing there, do we have evidence that speaks to what we are investing in, what works and what doesn't work, all falls under that objective. And the NIPN project is supposed to help provide data to be able to say this works or this doesn't work. The other objective is also about capacity building of national policy makers and program planners to better use evidence in designing and implementing nutrition policies, projects, and programs. We know that there are a lot of actors out there who are designing programs, policies, and all this on nutrition. So this project is to build their capacity to better do what they are supposed to do, to plan better, to design policies better. And what is the ingredient that the NIPN project is bringing in? It's information and data, so that we have evidence that is easily accessible and utilized for us to get better policies and all this. So those are the global objectives that this NIPN seeks to achieve in the next 4 years in Uganda. Now, in practice, bringing those objectives closer, in Uganda, NIPN seeks, number one, to maximize analysis and interpretation of existing information and data on nutrition to inform policy. What does this mean? It means we have to do a lot of analysis and interpretation of existing information and data. NIPN is not using primary data. NIPN is using secondary data, the existing data. In my preamble, I was saying there is a lot of research that has been done. A lot of data is everywhere. In universities, in NGOs, in UN agencies, all those have data. So our primary role is to maximize analysis and interpretation of this existing information and data for it to inform policies. And that is the point of intersection. There is the analysis side and also the policy side, and we need to provide evidence, but evidence that is coming from a thorough analysis. Number two, NIPN in Uganda is also trying to identify gaps in nutrition information and data and support data gap filling. In other words, we can say there is a lot of data out there, but when you do data cleaning, you do data harmonizations and all those processes which you know better, you may realize that on certain critical policy questions or policy areas, there are some gaps, and these gaps have to be filled in. Now, once we find the data gaps, NIPN will come in to look for some data to do the data gap filling if it's a critical need for the country. So we are also looking at that. Then the other one is generating understanding of effectiveness of nutrition interventions, approaches, and investments. Now, this one, people have been, for example, doing biofortification of food. There is industrial fortification. The question is, does it work? We need data to determine the effectiveness, the efficacy of some of these interventions. And once we get the data, then we can better advise government on investment. So NIPN will play a major role in that. We had UNAP 1, we are going to UNAP 2. What worked in UNAP 1 and what didn't work? We don't want a risk of carrying whatever didn't work in UNAP 1 and put them in UNAP 2. We keep implementing and without knowing. For example, we see stunting, we see anemia, we see all these are on the increase, but stakeholders have been implementing interventions. The question is, are they implementing interventions that work? No one can answer that unless we have the right data and information, and that is NIPN's role to do that. Lastly, institutionalize nutrition information management systems in all relevant MDAs. Institutionalization means NIPN should be part of the DNA of your sectors, your agencies and departments. Use of information, the use of data should be part and parcel of whatever you do. If you are proposing any program development, where is the evidence? If you are going to propose any policy review or policy change or anything, we need evidence. That's why we are saying this institutionalization to happen, we need to work together so that if you are thinking of anything in the Ministry of Agriculture, you can contact NIPN at OPM and say, we are thinking this, but where is the evidence? and we work together to see that the evidence is there. And this institutionalization can only also work when there is improved data management in the sectors, when there is a level of capacity in the sectors which NIPN is here to build. For example, before you say we do this, you must have known that either we have the capacity or not. If the capacity is not there, you contact us and see how we work together. Am I moving very fast? What are the guiding principles for this project? Very, very quickly. One is sensitive to context. NIPN is able to offer its services that with sensitivity to context. The analysis which is done or which will be done in NIPN should meet the country's needs and priorities. That's fundamental. This is a government project. Whatever analysis or whatever is done should be sensitive to the country's needs with regard to nutrition. For example, we have the nutrition policy, we have the UNAP2, the NDP3, and all that. NIPN should be seen to generate data that can inform the completion of those processes, those national processes. In other words, the government has already initiated. UNAP1 expired, we need UNAP2. Can NIPN support the evidence building to inform that process? If it can't, then that is a failure on our side. For your information, we have already prepared a paper to inform NDP3 what do we want to see included there. So all those processes respond to this point. Point number 2, country-owned. If this is a government of Uganda project, whatever it does, the processes, the approaches, the systems have to be owned. The platform and the analysis of the data must be embedded within the existing structures and systems. For example, we have a data analysis unit that sits at UBOS, and we have the policy unit and the project management unit that sits at OPM. OPM and UBOS, they are all government. This is part of the institutionalization objective, meaning that in all your sectors, your information management systems should be able to be functional, and they should be able to capture information on nutrition. And you should be able to utilize that. The other principle, which is very critical, is building upon what exists. This project is not starting from scratch. It has to build on what is already existing. We know all sectors have information management systems. Some are functional, some are not functional. And we come in to strengthen the functionality of those and build from there than coming to start from scratch. But should we find there is a need, that could be a capacity issues that we can look at. But this should build on existing information systems and existing coordination mechanisms. So NIPN is just implemented from those. Then it's about capacity strengthening. I've already alluded to that. It's capacity development all through. Even where you seem not to see the capacity element, it's actually in there. For example, you could be in a workshop and you are discussing in the group to reflect on the policy processes within your sector and give us information around that. The output, we can take it. But the process you go through is a part of strengthening your own abilities to continually do that. So when we are doing these workshops, these processes, there are those we've interacted with for a number of times. We have that at the back of our minds that should the NIPN project go away in 4 years' time, those skills, the knowledge, the capacities should remain with government staff. Adding value, the project complements and synergizes with the existing initiatives. For example, there is DINU within OPM, there is NOSAF, there is Dr. Deep. There are also other projects within the various ministries and all that. So we want to complement what is already happening. And the last one, the project is to enhance multi-sectoral efforts. As you might be aware, that nutrition is a multi-sectoral issue. It's implemented by various actors and stakeholders from various sectors. So this project is multi-sector, at the same time multi-stakeholder. And that is a very fundamental issue, and we want to enhance and strengthen that. So the capacity development framework looks at enhancing that. The last point I want to make is the structure of implementation from the OPM side. As I've already said, we have one unit which is in UBOS. I think Dr. Nasur will speak more to that, but I want to give the overall structure. The overall structure at the highest level, we have the permanent secretary, Office of the Prime Minister, who has the overall oversight, not only of NIPN and all projects within OPM. Then the project director for NIPN, she is the Assistant Commissioner, Strategic Coordination and Implementation. I think most of you have met Madam Maureen Bakunzi. So she's the director of the project. She's also a full-time staff of government of Uganda. Now, below that, we have the project management unit, which also doubles as a policy unit for the project, which I head, and I also do the coordination, the overall coordination of the project. Then, in that, at OPM, we have the Finance and Administration Officer. He introduced himself. We have the Communications Officer and the Project Assistant. So that is the side of NIPN from OPM side. Can I invite Dr. Nasul to add the other side of UBOS, and then we ask questions together?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you all. Ask a few questions. I don't know how it would look like, but how many of you are nutritionists in this room? One. Oh, okay. So that's good. Actually, I think it's the first time we've had, actually, we've never had more than two. So that's always the case. Do you have plans in your department to hire nutritionists? Okay. So that's, again, another question. Who is a nutritionist? So a nutritionist definitely here is defined by profession. So if you're not a nutritionist, then you're not a nutritionist. Right? Yeah, you could be described as what? As tell you, your diet is bad or your diet is good, and if you don't eat this, you'll get that problem. And mostly I find their profession close to medicine than anything else. But then, as we go on, you realize that actually it's one of the most important things that people should have. You realize, I always say this, that if we had started from the time of Millennium Development Goals, if we had said, maybe call them Global Nutrition Goals, we would have covered everything, including Millennium Development Goals. Until today, if we have like sustainable nutrition goals, okay, we would have everything, including SDGs. And I think that would make our problems much smaller. So you realize that nutrition is a very important subject to talk about. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm actually an economist, confused somewhere, who is learning about nutrition all the time, plus other related things to nutrition. So nutrition is not all about what you eat. It's about how you eat it and how you produce it and how you make it, palatable, but also nutrition sensitive. So that at the end of the day, you have a healthy population, and a healthy population that is productive and all of that. So you realize that nutrition is basically cutting across. Now, we had, I think, from the beginning about 8 sectors, but now we have also added, by default, Ministry of Science, and I suppose other ministries should come on. There is now new research coming out showing, your nutrition status and your health is dependent on where you live and determined by, what access to the markets, and how do you get access to the markets? You have to use roads, right? And so you really see we need Ministry of Trade, which is already on board, but we also need Ministry of Works. Before you know, everybody will be on board, because nutrition is so important that it should not be done only by nutritionists. What is lacking, in my view, is that we don't have one, just like in other sectors, we don't have enough data and enough capacity, to analyze these things and be able to inform the policy making, but also the programming. What should we do to improve the nutrition status or health status of our individuals? The second part, which I really think would be important, is we can't have many nutritionists. We want to have them, but we can't have them because of the structural complications that we have. I suppose that, I may be corrected here if I'm wrong, but I suppose that even in the Ministry of Agriculture, I don't think they have a position of a nutritionist. If it is there, it could be very new. When you go to the districts, we don't have nutrition officers there. But even if we wanted to hire all of them, we have 127 now districts, 30 something. So 130 roughly districts. If we wanted to have a nutrition there in each of these districts, maybe we won't get enough of them at the moment, okay? Nutritionists to teach us how to do nutrition. So then you'll have economists analyzing nutrition, but also feeding their children well, knowing how to feed. You'll have governance people knowing which governance systems to put in place for nutrition to be given, of course. Planners, to plan for nutrition. Finance people to know how to account for nutrition. Development partners and funding organizations, including government, so for instance here, Ministry of Finance, to allocate funding for nutrition, and so then nutrition basically becomes part of it. So NIPN is at that sort of like intersection of wanting to bring all these people, try to show them how important nutrition is, and then at the end of the day, everybody is moving in that direction of nutrition. Medical Teams International, but we also have nutritionists on board. I think people like in nutrition, SAM, MAM, GAM, stunting. So all those issues, we need to understand them and then do something about them. So that's a part of capacity building, and NIPN is all about capacity building. Now, in terms of informing policies, okay, talking about nutrition, somebody is thinking about, how do I get, how do I get to know that I'm healthy enough? So then you start talking about anthropometry, you start talking about blood tests. Now, I can't take a blood sample from a person to test for instance, anemia. But doctor there can analyze it, okay? Can give me the results. Then I'll use that result, okay, to link to other things. Is it because of the food that you're eating? Is it because of the environment that you're living in? Can pass that information to the decision makers to say, okay, it's because of the food. No, it's because of the housing. No, it's because of the air pollution. No, it's because of that, okay? So that's why NIPN is at the center of all this. So it's to begin with a capacity building project within the government systems such that it becomes a day-to-day activity. So we sit at UBOTS because UBOTS is a data center for all government and non-governmental, in the information that exists, and then build plausible arguments about effectiveness of interventions, programs, or approaches, and then finally contribute to monitoring national and subnational progress in preventing malnutrition. So again, there are three main results for the NIPN project. One is